It was still dawn when the silence of the house broke in absence, a silence not of peace, but of something wrong, of cowardly farewell, of emptiness that screams in the corners where love once lived. In the workshop, the iron was waiting for first blow of the day, but the one who hit first was the abandonment. Adewale woke up to the weight of what was no longer there, the body of the woman next to him, the smell of porridge on the fire, the hope that, despite her hunger, she would stay. Chino and I left before daylight, and left behind not only home, but 2 young daughters and a man still standing but already broken inside. He loved her as one who planted in the desert, with faith that one day it would rain. But the drought was too long. The hunger was not only in the stomach, it was in dignity, in the eyes of his daughters, who asked for milk when he only had stories. And as much as he told himself that love could handle everything, he realized there, with a crumpled note in his hands, that even love is a point where it gives in cracks, runs through his fingers, and disappears. Sorry, I can't do it anymore. That was it. No tears, no hug, only the door ajar and the noise of the world continuing, as if it had not ended inside him. The twins were still sleeping, huddled in the thin cloth he washed on Saturdays with borrowed soap. They still dreamed, perhaps of their mother's lap, perhaps of nothing. And he stood there, standing between the suppressed crying and the obligation to get up, because someone had to stay. Someone had to continue even with his heart in rubble. He didn't know, on that gray morning, that those 2 quiet seeds would become trees that would bear fruit for the whole world. He just knew he had to keep persisting, that he needed, somehow, to transform that cold and dry ground into a fertile ground. Adewale didn't run after her. He didn't beg. He didn't scream. He only looked up to heaven, as he did in the days when bread was lacking and hope seemed to be delayed. And in that mute look, he prayed the most sincere prayer a man can pray. May they not feel the same pain, that I can take whatever, but let them flourish. And that's how the story began. Not with a miracle, not with lights in the sky, but with abandonment, silence, and decision, to love even without being loved, to stay even when everyone leaves, to plant even without certainty of harvest, because some roots grow in the dark, and they flourish when no one expects it. The pain of abandonment does not have a loud sound. It doesn't explode. It echoes. It lodges in the corners of the soul, like dust that no one sees but suffocates. Adewale woke up every day and did the same ritual. He washed his face, warmed the stale bread with a drop of oil, and watched his daughters, still sleepy, tidy up the cloths to go to school. He was a father present, but all the time with his absence throbbing. Chino and I was gone, but left behind a specter that hung over everything. Her scent was still on the pillow. The last pot he used was still there, with the wooden spoon tilted, as if he would return. But she didn't come back. Not a letter. Not even a phone call. Adewale did not cry where others could see, because the dignity of those who remain is silent. He smiled at customers, replied, "All right," at the market, shook hands firmly as if nothing had changed. But there were nights when the crying came out dry, without tears, just a squeeze that pushed the air back in. It was more than nostalgia. It was the feeling that I had failed, that it wasn't enough to hold the woman he loved, that he was not able to give her what she needed, even though he gave everything he had. He began to distrust his own worth. When I saw the mothers at the school gate hugging their children, something tightened my chest. When he heard a couple laughing on the street, he looked away, not out of envy, but out of fear of remembering. Remember the day he tried to make fun of Chinona, and she just looked at the floor. Remember the nights when they slept on their backs, without touching, without speaking. Remember the moment when he stopped being a companion and became just another burden. But there was something about Adewale that kept it from falling apart. Maybe it was the twins' eyes, so innocent, so full of silent question. Perhaps it was the faith he cultivated, as one cultivates a garden hidden in the chest, without fanfare, without urgency, but with perseverance. He knew that, even cracked, it was still ground. And cracked ground also supports roots. What hurt the most was not her absence. That was what remained. The silences, the whys without an answer. The feeling that their love, which was once fire, turned to ashes before its time. And even so he stayed, because someone needed to stay. Because even cracked, even tired, it was a foundation. And deep down, even without knowing it, he was already starting to rebuild himself, not for him, but for them. For those 2 girls who still smiled even without understanding that they had been left, that they still called for their mother, without anger, without hurt, only with nostalgia. And it was there, in that space between pain and duty, that something new began to germinate. Not an immediate solution, not a miracle, but a silent resistance, the courage to continue, even with a broken soul. It was late afternoon, and the sun was already saying goodbye to the world with that rust tone that covered everything with a beautiful melancholy. Adewale swept the workshop as he did every day, pushing dust, bits of wire, forgotten screws. The broom creaked on the dirty floor, and the sweat on his brow mingled with an old weariness. The metallic sound of trains in the distance, the smell of grease in the air, the hum of an old radio, all made up the scenery of his silent routine. But on that day, there was something more. An unusual shine among the rags, an unexpected reflection under the bench. Adewale bent down, and among oil and dust stains, found a gold bracelet. It wasn't jewelry. It was real, heavy, thin, with a stone in the center that seemed to contain the light of the whole day. For a moment, he froze. That could pay for everything. The milk of the month, the girl's books, the electricity debt, even to repair the roof. His heart pounded. No one was looking. No name recorded. No witnesses. He sat on the floor, bracelet in hand, and took a deep breath. The entire workshop seemed to have stopped, as if time was waiting for its decision. The thoughts came like a storm. She left because of this. Because I was poor. Because I couldn't support the house. This can change everything. But then, like a whisper from the soul, something spoke louder. But at what cost? He remembered the twins sleeping hand in hand, the way they smiled when he made up stories of enchanted kings and blacksmiths. He remembered the oath he took on the morning of abandonment. He would never let the pain make them bitter. And there, on that dirty floor, he made a new choice. He got up, wiped the bracelet with a cloth, and placed it on the counter, waiting for the owner to return. It was a small gesture, invisible to the world. No newspaper would tell that. No camera would record. But inside him, a door opened. Honesty, even when no one sees, shapes destinies. And at that moment, Adewale didn't know it, but he had planted another seed, one that would teach his daughters that character is not inherited. It is learned in clay, in scarcity, in solitary decision. That night, he slept hungry, but the heart, for the first time in a long time, was full. And sometimes, that's all that sustains a man, the certainty that, even surrounded by darkness, he chose to be light. In the workshop, where iron spoke louder than laughter, two girls grew like plants that are born in improbable but stubbornly alive cracks in the sidewalk. Amara and Adana, twins but never identical. While one climbed on the benches to dismantle old radios, the other sat in silence to draw what she saw, what she felt, what she dreamed. Amara, brainstorming, was the kind of child who asked how to fix the world with a screwdriver. Adana, an introspective breeze, was made of silence and color, saw beauty in the cracks of the walls, and traced futures with borrowed pencil. They grew in the interval between the noise of the machines and the silence of absences. They didn't have expensive toys, but they turned scrap metal into kingdoms and torn cloths into heroin covers. While other children learned brand names, they learned the value of a nail, the drying time of a paint made with charcoal and flour. They created, not to impress, but to survive emotionally, to fill the spaces left by a mother who had disappeared and by a world that still did not recognize them. Even so different, there was an ancestral harmony between them. It wasn't just the blood. It was a silent pact of two wounded souls who decided not to let pain define who they would be. When one fell, the other reached out. When one cried in the corner, the other made fun of an old can, drawing a smile. Adewale, who saw everything from a distance, did not say much, but within him a timid hope sprang up. He knew something in them flourished, something that neither he nor abandonment could explain, a kind of ancient strength, as if her daughters carried in their bones a memory of ancestors who never accepted silence as destiny. Sometimes, when the sun went down and the light came into the crack in the broken roof, it was possible to see them dancing on the clay floor, as if that were the stage of the world. Amara with her wire inventions, Adana with her drawings of realities not yet lived. And on that poor ground, without carpet, without promise, they drew a future that the world did not yet see, but that, like every root that grows in secret, was already ready to emerge. Because they were different, but they had the same root, a father who stayed. It is a dream that refused to die. In the corner of the neighborhood where time seemed to move more slowly, there lived a man who carried books as someone who carries water to seeds. His name was Chakuma, former engineering professor, forgotten by the city, remembered only by those who still knew how to listen to stories. He wore a crumpled hat, faded clothes, and walked with a cane made from the branch of fallen baobab, a symbol of resistance, memory, and time. The boys laughed at him, calling him a crazy old man. But Adewale saw something else, wisdom at rest. And it was he who, when passing by the workshop and seeing the twins playing with scrap metal, recognized what the world still ignored, a fertile field. Chukwuma did not arrive with promises. He didn't speak loudly. He just approached one late afternoon, offered a book with yellowed pages, and said, "This one talked about a man who made light with what no one wanted." Amara held the book as if holding a prophecy. Adana smelled him as if acknowledging the past. Since then, the old man began to visit them frequently. He brought more than books. He brought looks that said, "I believe in you." It had phrases that stuck in my memory. "The world is in a hurry, but trees grow slowly. He who does not have a glass ceiling builds his own with wisdom. You are not born a genius. You are born attentive." He did not teach for the now. I planned it for later. His words did not come as a lesson. They came as water that waters. And the girls absorbed each teaching as if they were part of a lost lineage, found there between grease and screws. Chukwuma taught that failure is part of it, that beauty isn't persistent, that light does not need to be intense. It is enough to be continuous. And when she showed old drawings of African contraption, Adana saw there what she had always tried to paint, creative ancestry. Amara saw mechanisms that seemed to scream for reinvention. Adewale, watching from afar, understood that he was no longer alone. Someone besides him had cared. Someone watered those seeds with faith and knowledge. And for the first time, he felt that his daughter's future did not depend on luck or miracle, but on roots being strengthened, in silence, with respect to time, with confidence in the light that would come. Because Chukwuma didn't see children. He saw destiny. He saw legacy. He saw possibilities in failures. And in the two girls who played with garbage, he saw what many do not even see in the windows, genius in buds. It was a dawn like any other, or at least it seemed like it. The neighborhood slept, enveloped by that silence that only long nights know. But a snap changed everything. First the smell, then the fire. It started small, perhaps due to an old short circuit, perhaps due to an invisible oversight. And within minutes, the entire workshop, that temple of struggle, sweat, and dreams, was on fire. Adewale ran, tried to put out, screamed for help. The flames responded with roars. In moments, everything he had built turned to embers, ashes, and blackened memory. It wasn't just a workspace. It was a floor where he saw his daughters take their first steps, the roof under which he resisted the cruelest days, the shelter that held his dignity, like a sewing thread in threadbare fabric. He knelt before the ruins and, for the first time in years, let the tears flow. The hands, once firm, now trembled, and the soul seemed to have been burned along with the furniture. It seemed like the end. But there was an invisible force that was already growing. Adana, with her shy hands, had transformed her drawings into something more. The day before the fire, she recorded a video. She's showing her works, talking about the stories behind the traits, the women she saw in dreams, the mechanisms her sister created. The video was posted on a small profile, with almost no followers. But the morning after the fire, when everything was just smoke, the world woke up talking about them. The video went viral. It was more than art. It was a testimony. It was beauty emerging from where no one expected. Amara, unaware of the video's reach, had taken one of his inventions to a local fair, a makeshift filter that purified water with charcoal and plastic scraps. A simple but powerful idea. A reporter who happened to pass by recorded everything. And in less than a week, they were in the newspapers, on the portals, in the WhatsApp groups, on the meeting tables of those looking for innovation. What seemed like ruin turned out to be rebirth. From the ashes, light was born. From the loss, presence emerged. The world saw what Adewale already knew. Those girls were not ordinary. And the workshop that burned was not the end. It was a flash that caught the eyes of the world. Pain became a seed. And what burned, deep down, only cleared the ground for something bigger to flourish. Because there are losses that, without us knowing it, make room for the vision to become inevitable. And in that charred workshop, a new time began, not with machines, but with purpose. 10 years had passed. Time did not ask for permission. It just passed, like a river that does not return to look for those who stayed on the bank. The twins were no longer barefoot girls on the workshop floor. They were CEOs of a billionaire company that transformed garbage into technology, pain into art, absence into power. Amara, with her restless mind, led the most daring projects of social innovation. Adana, with her sensitive soul, was a creative director who shaped the world's imagination with firm strokes and deep stories. And next to them, Adewale, now recognized as a symbol of quiet courage, watched the harvest of what he once watered with tears. It was in this scenario that Chino and I returned. There was no letter announcing it, no prior notice. He just appeared with a downcast face, his look full of remorse and an attempt to smile. I brought flowers, maybe out of habit, maybe out of guilt. She wanted to meet her daughters again. He wanted to know what those girls he had once left asleep had become. But I didn't know that they were no longer the same. They were not orphans of his absence. They were the fruits of his departure. Women forged by the pain she caused. Adana greeted her at the entrance of the company, in a room where silence said more than any words. There were no hugs, no accusations, just a ticket, delivered with both hands, the same childish handwriting she had left in the past. In it, a simple sentence: "We are the fruit of your absence, but we flourish even without watering." Chino and I read it, and for a moment she faltered. "What did you expect? Immediate forgiveness? A fresh start?" That note was not revenge. It was a fact. It was an answer. It was limit. She wanted to explain. She said she was confused, tired, lost, that poverty suffocated her, that the fear was greater. But the words no longer found fertile soil. The time it took to leave had been shorter than the time it took to rebuild what it destroyed. And there, in front of the daughters who now occupied rooms that she never imagined, she understood that one does not return to a home that continued even without us, that some doors, even open, no longer recognize us. Adewale, who was watching from afar, said nothing. There was no anger in his eyes. There was peace, a peace that only those who stayed know how to cultivate, because he didn't have to conquer the world to prove his worth. It was enough to stay when everything said it was time to go. And in that silent reunion, a subtle truth took hold. Chino and I was not an enemy. It was absence, and absences have weight, but they also have an end. What flourished in spite of it. And now, it no longer fit where it was lacking before. Adewale never knew how to speak in public. He never went on stage, never wore a suit, never used the words that big businessmen use. But everyone who met him knew he was great. And his greatness did not come from diplomas or figures, but from roots. He was a man who knew the timing of things, who knew that seeds do not grow because we want to, but because we take care of them. He was not the boss, but he was the founder of a legacy. It was a daughter's idea to transform the rubble of the old workshop into an institute, a place where young people like them, born on forgotten corners, could learn, create, dream. The Adewale Institute was named in his honor, but he didn't feel like he owned anything. He just walked the corridors, observing the curious eyes of the new apprentices, as if recognizing a field of sunflowers still in bud. He would touch the boys' shoulders firmly, smile at the girls with respect, and always say the same thing: "It's not where you start, it's what you choose to cultivate." I didn't know what mentoring was, but I was everyone's mentor. He didn't understand algorithms, but he knew how to listen when someone's heart asked for silence. And in the most difficult moments, when a young person thought about giving up, it was enough to look at him, and it all made sense. Because here was a man who never left, who saw the world collapse and remained standing, who lost everything and still offered shelter. What used to be a workshop has become a seedbed of ideas, of courage, of dignity. There, among wooden benches, pieces of scrap metal, donated books, and attentive eyes, a new country sprouted. A country where the future did not depend on chance, but on the decision not to repeat the cycles of abandonment. And in every invention, in every design, in every solution that was born inside, there was a trace of Adewale, the man who believed before anyone else. He did not seek recognition. He did not seek glory. He was looking for continuity. I wanted other parents to know that it is possible to resist, that other mothers knew that leaving is not the only way, that other children knew that there are adults who choose to stay. And so, without making noise, he became a bridge between the past and the future, between pain and transformation, between abandonment and restart. A firm, silent, and necessary bridge, as he always was. It was late afternoon, the sky tinged with old gold, as if time itself bent to contemplate what was about to happen. Amara knelt on the same floor where, years earlier, her father had almost given up. There was no audience, no speeches, only the wind passing slowly, as if respecting silent ceremonies. In his hands, a coin, worn, simple, with no commercial value, but with a symbolic weight that the world could never measure. That coin had been given by Adewale on a difficult night, a night when there was no dinner, but there was faith. He handed it over saying, "It's little, but keep it. One day, this will remind you of where we started." And now, she was back on the ground who saw tears, who felt despair, but who also held steps. Amara dug with her hands, not to hide, but to plant. He buried the coin with the delicacy of someone who knows the value of the invisible, and on it, he deposited a tree seedling. It was a gesture, but not just any gesture. It was a symbol, it was a rite, it was an inheritance. The tree, over time, would grow there. It would offer shade, perhaps fruit, but more than that, it would be living memory of a father who stayed, of two daughters who flourished, of a story that began with pain, but refused to end in pain. That land, which was once a workshop, which was once ashes, which was once a ground of weeping, was now sacred, because in it there was justice restored, honor planted, a living legacy. And for anyone who passed by and asked what that tree meant, it was enough to say, this is where he cried. It was here that he resisted. It was here that hope chose to be born, because the buried coin was not giving up. It was seed, and every seed, when respected, one day transforms, on strong roots, on sweet fruits, in a future that, even coming from a broken past, chose to flourish, in the name of love, in the name of dignity, in the name of everything that only those who remain understand. And it transforms, silently, deeply, forever. If this story spoke to you in any way, don't let it end here. Subscribe to the channel to walk with us through other journeys like this. Activate the bell to be notified with each new video. Leave your like so that this message reaches those who today need a fresh start. And don't forget to share, because hope, when divided, multiplies.